Just like a movie, just like a storybook. We are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. We'll take it all the way and live another day. We'll make a statement to the world that we're here to stay. Whoa, whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. It's time to be the hero. Champions or just the shooting stars? We'll put our courage to the test in the final hour. And do we stand tall and rise above it all? You know we're coming at your heart like a cannonball. Whoa, whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. It's time to be the hero. This is where we'll save the day. When the lights go out, yeah, we'll stand our ground. You know where there's a will, there's a way, yeah. Just like a movie, just like a storybook. We are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. It's time to be the hero. can see the world through open eyes and savor all the time before it flies. And every time you wake up, there's a new day that's calling out your name. Come join the game. Well, that's life. Take what comes along the way. That's love. Let it grow stronger every day. There's joy as the days go passing by. There's hope, a better life for you and I. We take our dreams and fly. Together we can try. That's life. Well, some things in this world were meant to be, like living life in peace and harmony. So follow where the road will lead you. Hand in hand we'll make our dreams come true. Enjoy the view. Oh, that's life. Take what comes along the way. That's love. Let it grow stronger every day. There's joy as the days go passing by. There's hope, a better life for you and I. We'll take our dreams and fly. Together we can try. That's life. Together we can try. Oh, that's life. We'll take what comes along the way. That's love. Let it grow stronger every day. There's joy, and as the days go passing by. There's hope, a better life for you and I. We'll take our dreams and fly. Together we can try. That's a life. I feel so alive, yeah. I'm happy head to toe. I'm in overdrive. Well, alright. Clear those clouds away. I can feel the sun, yeah. Let the music play. Now we've just begun. These are the best days. These are the best days. These are the best days of our lives, of our lives. There's magic in the air, and it feels so right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So follow if you dare, and you'll see the light shine so bright. 'Cause these are the best days. are the best days. These are the best days. These are the best days.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's call our meeting to order. Roll call, please, Ms. Neal.
Ms. Miller,
Here.
Ms. Parker,
Here.
Ms. Reed,
Here.
Ms. Schooley,
Here.
Dr. Varda.
Here. Is there a motion on today's agenda?
I move that the Board of Education approves the agenda for the special study session meeting of February 9th, 2022 as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion? The motion has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please, Ms. Neal.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Ms. Schooley,
Yes.
Dr. Varda.
Yes.
Wonderful. Now we move on to a report on the district membership/enrollment patterns and trends. For our audience, enrollment and membership are terms sometimes used interchangeably. In this discussion, membership focuses on the actual number of students in seats at our facilities, and enrollment is often used for budgeting purposes. Membership is data utilized by the facilities department to track student populations in school buildings in order to plan for program upgrades, capacity increases, building additions, and possibly new facilities. This information is also used to track underutilized schools in the district. Data will be shared on membership enrollment patterns and trends over the last 5 years, including a focus on the last and current year's data, 2021 and then 21-22, which covers membership enrollment, choice enrollment, students leaving the district, free and reduced lunch, homeschool increases, and membership comparisons with other Metro Denver school districts. Board members, we have allocated an hour for our discussion. Superintendent Dorland, before we begin, do you have anything to add for the presentation?
Sure. I'm actually really excited for the board to receive and have time to study and dialogue about this information. And I want to introduce Steve Bell, our Chief Operating Officer, who's here to present, Jeremy Felker, our Executive Director of Student Data Privacy and Reporting, and Bruce Huxley, our Director of Planning and Property. And I need to thank, in particular, Jeremy and Bruce for all of the work that they put into what I think is a very detailed and informative enrollment report for you, explaining some of the patterns and trends that our district is going through. The ability of these guys to be pretty flexible. I appreciate all of the questions that came from board members as we started presenting you with materials and board docs. And this team has been extremely responsive and flexible in adding information that answered some of your questions to the presentation. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And I'm looking forward to you all having an informative conversation.
Thank you, Superintendent Dorland. Welcome. Please begin.
Thank you. Just some preliminary comments that I'll make, and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy and Bruce for the detail of the presentation. Is every year, I think you all know this, we produce what's called an enrollment report, which is a detailed report in print and on our website of all the things that are the trends, population, enrollments on a school-by-school basis, articulation by articulation area, and also as the district at large. So what you'll see tonight, I just want to advise you, will be a precursor and a complement to that enrollment report, which is currently scheduled to be produced about middle of March. So with that, I'll let Jeremy and Bruce begin the presentation.
Bruce Huxley, Director of Planning and Property. Thanks, Steve. We'll just jump right into the slides. I wanted to clarify, and Ms. Schooley did a good job of that in the preamble, of the difference between membership and enrollment. We focus from the facility side on membership because we look at the number of kids in the school, how many seats, how many kids. That helps facilities analyze the buildings for future use and programming. Quick 2 years membership summary, and we focused on 2 years because of the COVID paradigm shift, if you will, that we've had over the last couple of years. So district-wide, we've had a reduction of over 5,500 students, 6.6%, and those are with district-managed schools without charters, 7.1% drop, about 5,400 students, And charters actually dropped about 228 students, 2.5% from their population. Across the board, significant drops. 5-year membership. This is a chart we use to really look at district managed versus charters. So the blue bars are full school populations, both charters and district managed, and the orange bars are charter schools. So you can see they're very consistent in the decline over the last several years, with a pretty good drop in the last 2 years.
Bruce, can you just clarify? The orange bars are district managed.
The orange, yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Did I reverse
I
that?
just want to
Sorry
make
about
sure that the slide was accurate. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. And we thought we'd bring in our Metro District chart as well to show that we've had drops in most of the districts across the metro area, which is to be expected. There were just a couple of schools that actually gained a few students and not many at that. But overall, we've seen a drop along with all the major districts in the area.
So this slide is data that is submitted by Jefferson County Public Schools as well as other school districts in regards to the students who are from out of district that are currently attending your school. And so we've compiled it into a choice in and choice out report. And we have 3 years showing the trend as well as the difference in between in and out. So if you look at this, for example, on Buyers 32J, you may ask yourself, that's a long way to travel to attend Buyers 32J for a Jeffco student. So those are students that are in an online school. And so what we can see is 2019-20, we moved from having 120 students out to Buyers to 378. And then what we're seeing that decline over this last year as we ramped up JRLP and other online programs to support those needs. What we can also see is a trend that in 2019-20, the overall difference between the in and out was around 1,600 students, and then that significantly decreased in that difference for 2021 and has begun to increase this year. When we dig into that data a little bit more, we can also access data in regards to specific schools. And so in referencing that Buyers 32J, we can see that those students are attending Ostrava Online Academy High School. And as we noted, there was an increase in 2021, and then that has decreased in 21-22. So these are trends that we're seeing in those students that are choicing out in those particular schools and greater than 50 or more Jeffco students. And this is sorted by school district so that you can see the grouping around that. And looking at the non-public school data for Jefferson County Public Schools, or Jefferson County, we can see that homeschool students that registered for homeschool in Jefferson County, had a slight, significant increase in 2021, and then there was a decrease in 21-22. We can also look at the non-public enrollment for preschool, kindergarten, as well as grades 1 through 12. We do see a slight uptick in grades 1 through 12 for 21-22 over the previous year. The other impact that we've seen besides enrollment is the number of students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch data. And so we have that three-year trend data as well, showing the decreases that qualify for both free and reduced. And so we have the percentages as well as the specific students that qualify in each bar. And in following up with food services, they noted that the main reason behind the decrease in applications and resulting FRL percentage decrease is the waivers we've operated under for the last 2 years. These waivers allow for us to serve all student meals at no cost, regardless of their free and reduced meal eligibility. So we know that that's a significant factor in the decrease in number of applications we've received. Turn this over to Bruce.
Thanks, Jeremy. This graphic here is very telling. It indicates or it represents all articulation areas in the district. This past year, overall, we lost. We had a reduction in students across the district in all articulation areas. The focus on the deeper red, which is the you can see is the Alameda, Jefferson, Arvada areas, the Sheridan corridor, if you will. And that's an area we've been watching for a while. We've seen the reduction of number of students for a while in those areas. This is a choice in, choice out by articulation area. It gives us a big picture of what's happening with the students moving in and out of their respective articulation areas. If you look at the choice in chart on the left-hand side, we have the articulation area, the number of students attending school in that area. For instance, Alameda is 2568. Those number of students that choice in, which builds that 2568, and then of course the percentage. On the right-hand side, we have the choice out. So under Alameda, 3921 are the number of school-age students living within that articulation area. And then those that choice out, 2289, which gives us our percentage choice out. On the choice in chart, you'll notice a few additional rows in there that don't identify specific articulation areas. For instance, district-wide, about in the middle, 225 students. Those are students that are going to some of the special programs, the Connections, Sebesky Academy, Mountain View, Miller Special. The other, as you move down that chart, right after option, there's the other category. That's the Jefferson Transition Services Program. So those students have graduated, but they're still in the system. So we separate those out as part of this. So it's 100% option there. And then at the very bottom, we have blank. That 10 students, that's our, those are students that are going to the Firefly Autism Program in the district. So they've been separated out for the purpose of this chart. I wanted to focus a little bit on the utilization now. We've been asked to look at those schools or facilities where we have the lowest utilization across the district. So we'll start with the high schools. Arvada High School, you'll notice the shaded areas or the shaded cells. That indicates it's below 65% for each of those years. And we track 5 years in reverse. In arrears, and you'll notice under the 2020, 2021, and 2022, Pomona shows up, Wheat Ridge, Conifer starts to show up. We're hoping that's the effect of COVID and not a larger trend, downward trend, but we need one more year of data to really analyze that. But Arvada and Green Mountain have been on our list for a while. At the middle school, utilization, we've been tracking mostly this year. We've hit a lot of it below 65%, and we have noticed the district-wide trend of fewer students moving from 5th grade into 6th grade that we had anticipated to fill up those middle schools. If you look at the 2018-2019 year, that's the year where we transitioned 6th grade. So you see a bump across the board there. Except for the K-8s, they already had 6th grade in them. And then slowly trend downward as we get to this year. So again, we need one more year of good data to really start looking at a trend on the middle schools. Sorry, this is a little hard to read, but we had a lot of data to put in here. These are the elementary schools that we've, again, based on some of the shaded cells, we've been watching several of them for a few years now. Fitzmorris Elementary, 36%. And we really focus in-house on those that are 50% or less, although we track from 65% down because we want to look at trending. But in terms of program use and utilization, we really focus on those that are 50% or less. And you'll notice that three of the 5 elementary schools listed there at the top are from the Arvada area. We're going to look at a little bit about cohort and how we project some of our memberships. And I thought it would be good to just go through some of the processes that we use. Most of you are familiar with the processes, but I wanted to just go through what those look like. The cohort survival is probably the main methodology that we use. That's grade progression, basically. Students moving from kindergarten into first, into second, into third, et cetera, and to track the percentage of that as they move through. That helps us analyze the projections. I also wanted to introduce talk about the regression-based forecasting. So it's not just the students moving through the system. We look at a lot of outside variables, housing methodology or housing methods, single family, multifamily, density. We also look at census data. We've started receiving some of the federal census data, but we aren't getting the detail that we really need right now, so we're waiting for a little more detail on that. Land saturation, density of housing, things like that, and the migration or change in household composition that we track as well. Students moving in and out, families moving in and out. A lot of reasons that happens. Housing prices, jobs, a lot of things affect that. A lot of variables there. This is a historic membership by grade, and it just shows over the last 10 years by grade how the number of students moving through the system. And we've been working for years on really trying to understand. One of the things we've been looking at is the pre-K into K, and it's an inconsistent pattern right now. But in general, what we've been seeing is about a third of the pre-K moving into K, not necessarily in the same school. Where they have the pre-K programs. So just a lot more data to collect and analyze on that. It's just there are so many variables on pre-K programs and reasons parents put their students in a specific pre-K program. And going back to the cohort survival ratios, this is a lot of math here. We track those numbers and we apply percentages to those numbers. For instance, the birth through K, the first column there, 110% at the top, 110.5% from 2012 to 2013. Those are all the children from birth to kindergarten that we track. So it's over 100% here, which means we're getting more students are moving into the area than being born in this area, or some students, which brings us up to 110%. So, but that we track those from birth, and there are so many variables on that too, because even though we may have a birth rate number in Jefferson County, we don't know what happens to that family or that child until they enter our system. And here's an example of live birth rates. This is the latest data we have is from 2020. But from 2019 to 2020, you can see a 3.7% drop in the birth rates across Jefferson County. And one of the things we always look at is how do we compare to other schools in the state and nationally. And this is a chart that we have showing some of those same statistics. And so nationally, the birth rate is down 4%, so we're right in that range of nationally. We're not such an anomaly. And of course, with these numbers, we're looking at the lowest number of births since 1979, we don't see a change in that trajectory. It's going to continue to go down. This chart here is we're always very cautious about establishing our projections on someone else's projections. But this is DOLA, Local Affairs. They have done some projections on school-age students, and the charts show over the next several years a more or less downward trend with most of those age groups. A little bit of a tick in 6 or 7 years, but that's so far out it's really hard to predict that. But this chart from DOLA is really reinforcing what we're finding elsewhere in the nation. And with that, I wanted to show this chart because it talks about national enrollment trends by state, and Colorado is right in that 2 to 3.99% decrease, along with a lot of other states. So we're not alone. A lot of states are experiencing the same thing. And this is our key metrics analysis chart. We track these just to make sure we're running our projections as efficiently as possible. But I wanted to show this because you can see the analysis for the past several years and then the COVID line. And that's that paradigm shift that we saw. And so that top line, dash dot line, that runs from that COVID to the right, that was those were our initial projections for this coming year and next year. The middle dotted line, if you will, shorter dotted line, was our projection for this year. So we missed again this year. That's 2 years worth of data. And I think we really need that third year of data to start setting a trend. 2 years is just not quite enough. But we do believe moving forward that we're going to continue on a slight downward trend, as shows up by that bottom blue dashed line there. It's going to parallel, I think, what we have predicted in the past, but just at a couple of lower octaves, if you will. Just fewer students, but that same downward trajectory. Nothing right now in the industry or research shows that we're going to get a significant uptick in number of students in the district. So that concludes the slideshow. Any questions or anything we can answer?
Great. Thank you all so much. This is our opportunity board to have a conversation, dig into what's been presented and provided to us. So I will open it up. Is there anyone who would like to begin our discussion this afternoon? Yeah, Ms. Miller.
I just had a couple questions and clarification. On the page 7, when you gave us the online course example of Astrava, thank you. Are there I think there's other ones that are online as well. Are there not? I think, is it Goal Academy?
I'd have to go through and verify the status. Colorado Connections would be one, is my understanding.
Yep.
Stravo actually has 3. The high school is the one with the largest current enrollment, Jeffco.
And then the BoCEs?
And the BoCEs would be another one. We have Durango has an online school, but they've lost significant enrollment over the last year.
Yeah.
But I can get a list of those if you're asking for the number of Jeffco students that are attending online.
Right, because I'm just wondering how we would try to transfer them over, or at least offer them up what they're getting from Goal or the BoCEs or those others, what we might be offering to see, how we could be attracting them back onto our offering, especially if we have drop-in opportunities and things like that for their students. But that's just a question of how many actually were on the online programs.
I think what's hard in regards to contact is we can certainly advertise, and we should advertise in regards to our offerings that are online. We don't know specifically who those students are.
Fair enough.
Just that they're Jefferson County students.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. And then I had another real quick question, and that was on the articulation choice in, choice out by articulation area. Is the choice out column let's say I'm Bear Creek and I have 5,982 children and 3,303 choice out. Do they choice to other Jeffco schools, or is that complete choice out of, and we're not tracking that? Do you know what I mean?
This chart represents students choosing within.
Okay. So we have 34,000 children choicing out of their articulation area, but choicing to a school within Jefferson County, correct? Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much.
Great. Other questions, dialogue? Yeah, Ms. Parker.
I'm interested in the difference between utilization and enrollment, because if I'm understanding it right, utilization is the total capacity of the building, how many students it could hold based on the size, number of classrooms, etc. But enrollment, you could have a higher enrollment with a lower utilization in one building than another building that's a smaller building, and it might have a similar enrollment, but we wouldn't consider it low utilization.
That's correct. So if you have different size schools, is what you're talking about. Correct. And that's why when we put this together, we wanted to stick with the percentages, because if we just identify a school that's, say, less than 300, that would include Coal Creek K-8, which is its own kind of standalone school, very small, but relatively highly utilized. Ralston Valley, Red Rocks Elementary, things like that. So that's correct. We calculate the capacity based on the design of the spaces. So number of classrooms, number of special ed rooms, things like that. And we assign those a number. In the case of elementary, it's 24 students per grade, or per classroom, sorry. Knowing that it could go higher than that, and it often does, but that gives us some flexibility so we're not overloading or overburdening the school. Did that answer?
Yeah, because I think there are a couple of things I would want to consider. One is the utilization as you proposed or presented it, but also if we were to talk about just number of students, then we would start to figure out how many staff we need to support that number of students, which is, in my mind, a little bit different than the number of classrooms and physical space we need. In other words, I guess I'm trying to say, if we had a huge building and we could have a really good size, 400 students, 500 students, but still have a lot of space left over and we could use it for some other purpose. But the school itself is vibrant because it's got a substantial number of pupils and staff.
Correct. It could have a sustainable elementary school.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Students.
Thank you.
And we have those very examples of some of the elementary schools that we placed in schools designed as middle schools, like Emory and Stevens Elementary.
Actually, I have a follow-up question to yours, Ms. Parker, and that is, when you use the percentage of 65% for facility utilization, can you just explain the rationale for that as a cutoff? I mean, you could pick a lot of numbers, but what is it about 65% that makes that meaningful?
65% is just the number we use. I mentioned earlier that we really focus in on those that are 50% or less, but we start tracking at 65. And that's just more or less, that's where you start to see spaces that are not utilized correctly, where you may have offices set up into classrooms, things like that start taking away from capacity. So it's not arbitrary, but it's somewhat based on what we've seen in the past, where we start losing efficiency in the building, and it could be 68%, but we settled on 65. Did that answer your question?
It did. I was wondering if there was a sort of industry best practice around, how you make that call for the cutoff, because sometimes it's a hard and fast number for a reason. So I was curious about it. Thank you. Ms. Reed, did I see you want to go ahead? There.
I'm curious, do we do anything to gather data on why people choice out? Like, even it just seems like even a Google form with sort of a general idea, are you choicing out because of something that's closer to a parent's work or something like that?
So some schools have taken that upon themselves. There's an effort and resources to standardize that process, and it's been discussed. We would need to make a decision and move forward with that, recognizing that there would be some impacts on schools and following up on that exit ticket. But we do not currently have a standardized exit ticket for Jeffco.
Anything else, Ms. Reed? Just want to make sure I didn't cut you off. Okay, Dr. Ryder, yep.
I might have a follow-up kind of on that question. I've been, and I didn't give you any time I emailed this, I didn't give you any time to really think about it. But in the area where I live, and I represent there are so many charter schools and then lots of elementary schools. It's where Arvada High is, and Moore Middle School in Pomona. And one thing I wondered, I just started kind of poking around on the public data for each school for what they report, especially on demographics. And I was looking at the choice in and choice out. And I think what seems clear is with charter schools, they maintain really good enrollment. They fill the slots. And I've been curious about whether their declines match the district declines. And I don't know. And then they're able to fill them up, so their enrollment might stay steady. But then I started to look at across like white and non-white students, and it seems like from the public data that there are, and it seems like a trend, more non-white students in the district-run schools, and then more white students going to the charter schools. And so it makes me wonder, what can we learn from our charter schools that makes them attractive places for kids and families to want to go, but more importantly, how do we bring those resources to our district-run schools so that we make sure that our non-white students are getting the same environments and programs that they might be getting at the charter schools? So I guess I have a real question about our demographics in the choice and choice out, and what it means for access to equal kind of opportunities across those schools. And I don't know that you have all the answers. It's more of a question, a big question I think I'm having.
So I'm hearing a couple layers of data. In regards to our choice enrollment process, we have a standardized process so that applications are not weighted. Access to those applications are consistent online, and you can apply to as many schools as you currently want in our system. So as we know right now, race and demographics around that wouldn't be a barrier. If there are additional supports, we try to work with schools in regards to applications around those. But we do a standardized lottery, and demographics are not used in that lottery or priority process other than a sibling that may attend or someone who has a staff member that works there. In regards to cohort stabilization, which I think you're asking for, we don't currently track that by school, but it sounds like you're asking if when students attend a charter school, do they continue on in that survival rate in that cohort for that particular school, and how does that compare in that survival rate for other schools? So that's data we would need to look at pulling in comparison. I think we have a cohort survival rate for the district, but I don't believe we have it by individual schools.
Yeah, that's right. We do have it by articulation area that helps inform us, but not by the individual schools.
Did I answer all of your questions?
And I don't expect all the answers. Because I have then it makes me think, well, then is there something about our choice process that is different in our demographics? Not in the lottery system, but this is getting a little bit bigger picture, I think. They're just questions as we're trying to think about what a thriving school looks like. And I think in that context, I'm trying to think, how do we just think about thriving schools for all our kids, especially if there are differences across just the way that, I don't know why it's turning out this way, but there are differences between our non-white students and where they're landing. I really don't expect you to have the answers to that question, but
So one, oh yeah, sorry,
I'm
go
so
ahead. I was
sorry.
just going to add.
Oh, please go ahead.
Well, I think, and this is just I think something that's important to say out loud, that if you look both at the articulation area enrollment declines, the Sheridan corridor, some of the eastern parts of Arvada, and then you also look at the list of school utilization, this impacts a lot of title schools. So just to name it and to say it out loud, that we have on the elementary schools particularly, 5, it's not the top 5, it's not in front of me, but it's the top few are all title schools. And so I appreciate the questions that you're asking around where are our students landing, and if you look at them sort of disaggregate that, I think it's an important question to ask. So yeah, go ahead with your next question. No, sorry.
My other one might be a little unanswerable, but I was just thinking, at what point do we not think that less is negative, that a decline is negative? I'll just say this is I'm a network scientist, and like a primary rule in network science is that more is not always better. You can just do, it's just, you can't do so much. You have too many nodes in that network. But so I just wondered, I don't know what that is, but is there anything, are we trying to stay steady? Are we trying to grow the number of kids in our network, in our district? This is a little philosophical too. If it's declining, obviously it affects our budget and how we staff, and I understand that kind of ripple effect. But is it always negative that when we have fewer students? Because we always talk about how to bring them back, how to recruit more families. So I guess kind of philosophically, when are we okay with a declining enrollment, and what is our goalpost for enrollment? Does that make sense?
I think that's a good comment, good question. We have to recognize that the district is trending downward. We do know in several of our areas, and most of our areas, we just don't have the number of kids we used to. We've got a higher aging population in Jefferson County, smaller families, and so we do have to recognize that we're we won't see a significant increase in the number of students. We will see pocket increases. For instance, the north side, Candela's area, still developing homes. We've got some development going on in the south by Red Rocks Ranch. So we'll see pocket increases, but overall, we're going to have fewer students within our articulation areas to deal with. And it's just something we need to recognize and work around. Absolutely.
So I have just a couple of questions, and then we can go around, make sure that if there are other things that have emerged for folks, for sure. So one of my questions is, so when we look at the live birth growth areas, and some of these titles are weird for me to say. It's anyways, okay. And where those are growing the most, it also sort of on that list is also 3 of the low utilization high schools. So what I'm wondering is, how far out is too far out, or what is a reasonable sort of time frame in terms of thinking about, it's not infilling, but whatever the word is for that school-aged group of children that are born this year, how far is too far out to be able to start thinking about where those trends may go? Do you understand my question?
I think so. If I don't answer it, I didn't.
It's a very clear answer for my.
We start from the birth rates, but again, as I mentioned earlier, we can track birth rates, but we can't track that child from birth to the time they show up in our system. That's one of those things that we're struggling with, and nationally school districts are struggling with, because we don't know if they're still there. We don't know if they've moved. We don't know if they're 3 or 4 siblings right behind until about year 3 or 4, where they may start showing up in our pre-K system. And we don't necessarily track private pre-K, only when they start showing up in ours. So did that answer your question?
It does. So basically there's a sort of around the moon where it's dark, no communication between, when they're born, and then we wouldn't really know. So it's not really an effective planning tool is what I'm kind of asking. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then my next question is, I'm wondering, when you look at the significant drops in membership across the grades that that you were showing, are there certain sort of consistent dips? Is it like during the transition times from like elementary to middle to high school, or are there other sort of patterns? And when we see more dramatic dips in membership of students?
We do see some patterns, especially at certain articulation areas, where we'll see a drop from 5th grade to 6th grade in the middle school program, which eventually starts affecting the high schools. So we'll see that 5th to 6th grade drop in the 2 articulation areas that have the 7-12 schools. We see that drop from 6 to 7. So we're already at a lower number going into middle school. So when we move the students the students move into high school, we see in some articulation areas another drop for the 8th to 9th grade level.
Yeah.
So there are some consistent patterns that we're seeing in certain articulation areas, yes.
One of the things I appreciate in the way in which this data is provided to us as a board is thinking about it in terms of utilization. And I know that there are some questions in sort of teasing out what that looks like and means and what's kind of most robust for our thriving schools. And I appreciate it because there have been so many sort of historically conversations within our communities, in certain communities, largely where I live, in the older parts of Jefferson County, that we intentionally built schools in a certain way to be a certain school model. And so when we have broader conversation, and this a little bit goes to your point, Dr. Varda, about, is it always a deficit way of thinking about it when it's a small number? We built a lot of those schools to have a different experience than some of the newer schools that were built. And so thinking about, as we continue these conversations about thriving schools and what opportunities or what can we do to create consistent opportunities for our students to thrive and be supported as a whole child, that may look different, but that some of our schools can be wildly successful, reaching the capacity and threshold that they have, but they were built differently. So I'm not saying that is the answer to that we don't have to make other decisions. I'm just pointing out that some of our communities have a very different context as a starting point, especially with elementary schools, than others do. And I want to honor that those differences are not always deficits. We just have to figure out how we're going to think about that in a way that creates consistency for our kids. So just my 2 cents. Other comments and questions? Yes, Ms. Miller.
I just want to follow up on that. And I think what we can do is Jefferson County is not unique to what's happening, right? I think you go back to the 50s and 60s and we built buildings fast because people were moving out to the suburbs and they were responding to, okay, we have a new build here. We've got to build for these 300 kiddos that are going to be in the family. So and we have a lot of small schools throughout Colorado that fed neighborhoods because the neighborhoods were growing so fast. And so I think that was a response to just the baby boom. I mean, that you can look at the age of buildings, and average age is 60 to 62 years old across the country. And so it's important for us to be thinking about, once again, what is the definition of a thriving school, and how do we finance and program so children have that Renaissance experience, they have that full experience. And we know we have finite resources and operating costs are going up. And how do we make sure we're balancing thoughtfully all those components? I do want to just kind of go back to that historical membership schedule that shows how from 5th to 6th grade, before we moved to the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, we had a pretty consistent transfer from 5th to 7th, or from 6th grade to 7th grade. There was the up until about 16, 17, the number of children going from 5th grade to 6th grade kind of increased, actually. And then we saw that drop off a little bit in middle school once we switched over to 6, 7, 8. And then we can also see kids coming back into the high schools. So trying to figure out why we are maybe losing those children in middle school, that experience, and then they're coming back to us. I know there's some examples like you cited where we are losing some kiddos in the 7th grade that continue 7 to 12. and understanding why we're losing children when that transition takes place. And I might say it's comprehensive high school and opportunities for athletics and arts and things like that that we might be talking about. But that's something trend that we should be looking at, understanding why we're now losing kids when we're transferring from 5th grade to 6th, 7th, 8th. And is it because we're offering a different program? Is it because we're offering, I would have thought more, because we had more extracurriculars at the schools or more options at the middle schools. But that's just a nuance for the past 4 years. I'd be curious about, or is it COVID? That's my excuse right now for everything.
Okay. Yeah. Let me go Ms. Reed and then Ms. Parker, please.
So I'm just going to follow that up and go back to what I said earlier, because it was like a quick question. But I guess what I want to know is how hard would it be to come up with a fairly fast, manageable exit ticket? I understand, you can't have short answers on that and things like that, but, some sort of general things that we know, because I think we need to know why people are choicing out. And number one, that informs how we decide what schools have to offer to be thriving. What are people looking for? And I also think there's a marketing piece to that. I think sometimes what happens is enrollment begins to decline, and that makes the school seen as not as good. Oh, nobody wants to go there. That's not a good school. And so what do people need to know about that school that they may not know about it, or about Jefferson County that they may not know? So I'm wondering, how hard would it be to come up with something like that?
So I think the first work is getting a standardized exit ticket that answers all those questions, right? So it needs to be easy enough for a parent to provide feedback on, but to collect that data, but not overwhelming that I don't want to spend 10 minutes doing it. And then we can standardize a process where a ticket would go out as a survey. Part of that is, what's the contact information? Is that going via an email? Is that a text message of follow-up? But I think more importantly, it's the resources spent in following up, because initially, just like when you get a survey satisfaction, how often do you fill it out? Typically, it's that second touch of saying, hey, we really want to know why you left. Will you take this time? Or having a registrar contact that family that they knew that left. Then there's also workloads on timing. So when we have end of the school year, there's going to be a point in time where we don't know a student won't return until the next year. They didn't show up. And then we get the records request and we find out they went to a different school district. So there's that workload of somebody has to weed through that, because they may not know they didn't return. There's going to be a bulk around that. So it is a significant workload. The number of resources needed to do it we would need to define and get that, but it would be additional work and resources to do that work.
And, I think in November-ish, we shared with you all some data around exit codes. So we do collect exit codes, and Jeremy, I think it would be helpful for the board to hear you remind them about that data that we do have, which is a start. It's not exactly what you're asking for, but I just think it is a start and something we can possibly build on in terms of this interest.
Correct. So we do have exit codes in regards to, because we report it, every school district reports exit codes across the state of Colorado. That's part of our graduation rate calculation and mobility rate calculations. And so if we have a student that we say is going to go to another Colorado school district and doesn't show up, there's actually a reconciliation process to align those out and in codes. So we do have those withdrawal codes. And so we do have specific in regards to they went out of state or they went to a private school. Some of those we know specifically in regards to like a private school, but we don't know which private school or why they left. So that's where an exit ticket would fill in those details. And what you would do is have a process to identify those particular exit codes you want to follow up with parents, knowing that that's going to take resources and you won't get 100%, but at least you did establish some trends. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yep. Ms. Parker.
Along the lines of the exit ticket, I was thinking possibly you could also address it by when somebody enrolls, where did you come from? Or why did you choose this school? And it might be a little cleaner, easier to do. Yeah. And then the question I had, in my district, I have a middle school that is one of the ones that was listed on your underutilization. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that another close to them middle school became K-8. Or I guess it was an elementary school, became a K-8. So I was wondering what your thoughts are. If we're going to have declining enrollment projections, how are K-8s going to fit in? Will it be something we're going to go towards if we have to consolidate schools? Or is it, I don't know, is it on your radar?
So we react to the academic side on placement of programs, but historically what we've seen is that if you give more options to the students, they might stay within that area. So maybe a K-8 is what they're looking for, maybe not. And we also look at K-8s when we may be lacking middle school capacity in the area, or middle schools are full. It gives an option to those students to stay in the area and not move out of that articulation to go to a kind of traditional middle school.
We are getting toward the end of our time, but I want to make sure, Superintendent Dorland, that you are able to chime in, and if there are any last thoughts from board members before we transition to our next conversation.
Okay, if you guys have more questions, I want to make sure you have that time. But I do have some thoughts that I'd just like to share, maybe summarize a little bit, and then if these guys want to add on, that would be great. I want to go back to Ms. Varda's question around, is smaller always negative? I think it's a great question, and I think it's difficult sometimes because this frame around our declining enrollment, it's the word declining, which does in just the nature of the word sort of connotate negativity. And I think, Ms. Schooley, you brought up a good example around at the school level, some schools were built to be small. I mean, I think we have schools they were built to be at a capacity around 280 or 300 students. And so by nature, they're going to be smaller. When we think about enrollment goals, or like Ms. Varda said, around goalposts for what are we really going after, from my experience, I think at a district level, not a school level, but a district level, it's helpful for us to think about capture rates. So we have to come to grips with the reality of the number of school-age children who actually live within our boundary, right? On top of that, you can have recruitment efforts to pull kids in from the boundary areas across the boundary in other districts. We can build that and market and do things like that. But if you just think about the number of school-age children in our community, I think what I'm hearing from these gentlemen this evening is that is just declining. Correct. Okay. And so I think a high-quality school district attracts its kids within its boundary to its schools. And so if we think about it from how many of the 100% of kids that we could capture into our schools and serve, what percent goal do we have at capturing those students into our district schools? That to me is an interesting way to look at it, from not necessarily a decline as a deficit, but a opportunity to serve the students and families we do have in our community is what we're going after. So it's just a different way to think about it. And I think thinking about capture rates, if the board wants to continue a conversation about that, we'd be happy to sort of think about that with you. And then I would also just say, in terms of the free and reduced lunch comments that Ms. Schooley made around, if you look at the eastern border and that map that shows the percent decline, it is true that our free and reduced lunch schools are more highly impacted by declining enrollment compared to their previous years. And so that in and of itself tells us that we have fewer free and reduced lunch students in our district. And so we may not be capturing as many forms as our food nutrition services group is telling us, but I think we also have just been declining in general with students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we need to dig into that a little bit more. And I think some of that has to do with maybe the housing prices and some of the inflationary costs of living within Jeffco, which I think is another reality that we just need to acknowledge. I do want to talk also about this capture rate and and outreach support from birth to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I have been part of the Bright Futures Roadmap group a few times, and we're trying to resurrect that group and really get it going again. I know Mr. Rupert, our former board member, was on that group, and he and I have had some very good conversations about the opportunity and potential of that work, including school district outreach the minute our students are born, and not necessarily, or at least starting a relationship with families who have babies in our community that we want them to know how great our schools are. And so really, what are some concrete ways we can do that outreach? That was part of the Bright Futures Roadmap work before the pandemic that we're trying to get going again. And I appreciated the conversations I'd been able to have with Mr. Rupert about that. And then these exit tickets, I think, are a really interesting idea. We've had some conversation, but trying to operationalize that is interesting. And then I just want to thank the team. I mean, I think they've done a nice job presenting a lot of data here. I hope it was helpful for you. And I think we have some great ideas about additional ways to present and more information that you might want in the future. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to, on the Bright Futures Roadmap, I was thinking right before you had said that too, on the other end, like the work that's been done with our bond program, like I toured Arvada High, which is on that list, and it blew me away. It's a beautiful school. This is, I'm for anyone listening, Arvada is a beautiful school, and the work done with the bond money. We have such amazing programs happening there. And when you walk in that school, it's not like a school that I walked in a couple of years ago. So I think, how do we market also the improvements at our schools that the bond program has brought forward, and the opportunities at a school like Arvada High that could reattract, the people within the neighborhood there. It's just been a really kind of amazing thing to see. So, yeah, I think we could do that capture rate work. I don't know if that was the right term, across the generational spectrum, in that way too. So I appreciate that.
Great. It is beautiful. Yeah. Great. Thank you all very much. I'm sure we'll have more conversations to come as we continue our work. Thank you for your time. So we are going to move now to have an opportunity to talk with the community from Fitzmaurice Elementary School. And we want to welcome, you guys can come on up. We want to welcome Principal Withy and Fitzmaurice school leaders and parents who are here to spend some time with us. For our audience, the board has invited representatives from Fitzmaurice Elementary School to join the community to join us today following the comments and concerns that they shared with us on January 6th in public comment regarding the challenges for the Fitzmaurice community and all of the amazing work that's happening at your school, which is phenomenal. Board members, we have set aside an hour for this conversation. And Superintendent Dorland, do you have anything you'd like to add before we begin our conversation?
I really appreciate those of you who are here to have this conversation with our board and help them understand the successes and the challenges that you're facing at Fitzmaurice. And I really want to acknowledge the board's openness to this conversation and willingness to listen to the community. And thank you to Principal Withy for the amazing work that you have been leading with your community to host dialogue, conversation, and help people understand, both your community as well as all of us, some of what the school is facing.
So I will turn it over to you. And if you don't mind just introducing or having folks introduce themselves so we know who's around the table, that'd be wonderful.
That's exactly where I was going to go. So I am Jen Withy, and I'm the principal at Fitzmaurice.
I'm Celeste Solti, the community superintendent.
I'm Sarah Brandstetter, and I'm the instructional coach.
My name's Christine Wiggins, and I'm a parent in Jeffco.
And I'm Stephanie Dillon, special ed teacher at Fitzmaurice.
And we have Miss Renee Nicothodes as well that's sitting here. I just don't want you to go unrecognized at the table. Great. Well, I will turn it over to you all, and so we can begin our dialogue with whatever you'd like to share.
Great. I know you all probably have questions for us since we spoke at public comment and you weren't able to ask us more. And so that's really, we're excited for that opportunity to talk with you and share more than just what was elevated by those of us that spoke in January. I think I want to elevate just your responsiveness. I think that's really, what we were hoping for and seeking. I think it's a hard conversation to have, but an important one to have. And it really connects to the presentation that we just heard before us today. As a leader of a building, there is nothing greater than talking all the amazing things that are happening in your school. You could talk about your incredible teachers and your kids and our rock celebrating that we did this afternoon because we filled our pom bucket and all of those great things. There's such pride as a leader in focusing on those things and celebrating those things. I also deeply believe that it is my job as the leader of the building to also really confront some of the brutal facts that we face. And we do that in looking at student data. We do that in looking at our culture, feedback, our family partnership surveys. All of those things help drive the work that we do. And so as a leader of Fitzmaurice, coming in July, our enrollment was down significantly from what was projected during that budgeting time that we're all in here in January. And so we watched that. We monitored it. We were really hopeful that maybe we were going to get more kids walking through the door come that first day of school. And unfortunately, that wasn't the circumstance. And so our decline in enrollment really started conversations early on in our system because it required the loss of a teacher in September because we just didn't have the capacity or the student numbers to support that. And so really what we wanted to do is engage in the conversation. We're not the only school that is struggling with some of the hard pieces that come from having a super small enrollment. And I think when we talk about small, I heard Superintendent Dorland kind of refer to that small school in that 250 to 300 range. Our enrollment today is 108, and that is today, our most recent enrollment. And so I think, we are small, but even smaller than that. And there are so many great things. I think, Ms. Varda, to your point, there are really great things that come from that small community and the work that our staff is doing, for our kids. But also with that, I think this group of people that spoke with me in January really elevated, for all stakeholders, some of the real challenges that we face because of that. And so, staff talked a lot about that student experience. And so, we don't even have one classroom a grade level. So that is those split grade level classes. And one of our major improvement strategies this year is ensuring rigorous core instruction for all students. And in a split class, I have masterful teachers doing an incredible job trying to make that happen. We have a new literacy resource. It's 90 minutes. You don't have capacity to do 90 minutes of second grade and 90 minutes of third grade. And so then you're having to make choices. So as a staff, we made the choice to have different people wearing different hats to ensure that happened. So Steph Dill is now a learning specialist and second grade phonics teacher. My instructional coach is now instructional coach and second grade core literacy teacher. Our DTL is our digital teacher librarian, our STEM teacher, and our second grade math teacher, because it was so important to us to make sure that those kids got what they deserve, and that is grade level core instruction every single day. And so as we think moving forward, right, we've responded this year, and I cannot give enough accolades to our staff members and the resiliency of our kids, but that's something we're going to continue to have to problem solve as we move forward and look at what our grade levels, look like in projections as I'm looking at next year. That those split level classes are going to continue to be how we're going to have to sustain. And I just really wonder how sustainable that is over time, knowing the weight that is put on staff members, and changes for kids in the middle of the year. Oh, now you have 5 teachers as a second grade student, not just 1. The other thing that staff spoke to was we have an autism center program, which I think is part of what makes Fitzmaurice, and is such a just appreciated part of our programming in our school. I think we have an exemplary model for an ASD program. Our students spend a significant amount of their time in that general education classroom, which is really the goal, is that we're in that inclusive environment and that they're not just in a center program classroom all day. However, one of the difficulties that we face is we only have that 1 grade level classroom for those students to go. And what staff elevated is we then have some reverse inclusion happening in some of our grade levels due to our number of students in general education that are also on IEPs for other things, for speech language, for, variety of other reasons that a student might have an IEP. Well, when our 5 students from the center program can only push into that 1 grade level, you have more peers with IEPs than with not. And so then it just becomes a little bit of, are we providing the peer modeling that they're really seeking in that type of environment? Is our staff equipped enough to have the supports when you have more students on individualized education plans working towards goals than students that are not? So staff really just elevated those concerns. And again, just out of what can we do? I think that's the question we're asking. It's bigger than anything I think we have control of right now within what we have. We are doing everything we can with the resources that we have. And then I think Sarah really spoke to just the urgency of decision making and really valuing our educators and our families. And I think that is so important, that we know that we are a really small school. And that's not a surprise to anybody, but we're people, and people have hearts, and people care deeply, and our families care deeply, our kids care deeply, and our staff cares really deeply. And so while we know what the head and says about our current reality, there's that heart component too. And so just how are we really being intentional and valuing all of our stakeholders as we start to have these conversations that the presentation before really let us know is bigger than Fitzmaurice. It's not just a Fitzmaurice concern. And I think that was our ask of you guys of let's start talking about this and start problem solving this. And then just the other piece around some of those experiences for kids. And that's what Christine spoke to, that she had to make the hard choice as a parent, because I have been working since July to get before and after care. We're too small. Companies can't afford to pay somebody to provide care for only a couple kids. And I think that thriving school, I loved hearing you guys use that language and think about that. I think we are thriving with what we have. But I think my continual wondering is, are we able to provide, even with everything we're doing, that equitable experience that they may be getting at another building? And just some of those peer pieces, also come into effect. And so those are just some of the things that I think we really spoke to last time, where I think there's probably some questions around that. And that's why they're all here too. They have their lenses and their capacity to kind of speak to those pieces.
I want to open it up and make sure. That was well articulated in terms of being able to capture what we heard, I think, on January 6th. But I want to open it up and make sure if there's other voices to add to the sort of framing for us before the board jumps in with questions or comments or thoughts. I don't want to cut anyone's voice off. Anyone else? Okay.
I think before, just one other thing that I think I didn't mention is our school has engaged in a lot of work through Relay and through being part of the Turnaround Support Network. And I know that came up. We're also a title school, although our number is significantly lower. We're at 39% this year. But I think that's kind of that day-to-day piece that's hard to quantify. So I think in day-to-day moments in Fitzmaurice, you will walk into our building and you will see kids learning and kids happy and kids having, teachers loving what they're doing, support staff fully engaged in the experience. But because of those multiple hats, the sustainability of some of the things that we know are really, really good for instruction, like having our data decision our DDI meetings, I'm trying to facilitate that. Well, if we have a kiddo in crisis, we don't have an AP. I have an ASD center program. We don't have a dean. And so some of those mental health pieces pull me away from being able to engage in that work. And so I think there's just, we were identified as a turnaround school in 2018. And then in 2019 bumped up to improvement. And I truly believe it's that work of the Relay levers and focus on culture and focus on instruction that really propelled that. And we have COVID that then made us pause, and we're not quite sure, where we're falling on that. But I know that that's the right work. I think everybody at this table would tell you they know that that's the right work. And just circumstantially, because of our reality, sometimes those things fall to the wayside. And so I think that's just another sustainability piece of ensuring that our teachers are getting that deep collaboration and having that time to analyze student data, and that we're having those walkthroughs and all of those things that become hard when you have people wearing so many different hats throughout the day to sustain.
So I want to open this up for a broader conversation, and just to say for folks that are all here, thank you, because you're taking time out of your day, your jobs, your family time. So thank you for engaging in the conversation with us. I think I know it's extraordinarily helpful, particularly as we move forward as a board and thinking about this thriving school idea and how we can make decisions that are really good for kids and good for communities, and how we define that. And it's a bigger conversation, but this is important, and I appreciate the engagement. So let's open it up. And who would like to begin with comments, questions, thoughts, things that have emerged for this community? Ms. Parker.
Thanks so much for coming again. And thank you for your enthusiasm for your school. It really comes through. I was wondering, from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest challenge, or how you got to where you are with the low enrollment? And I know Dr. Varda has mentioned that there are a lot of charter schools. I believe there are a lot of schools in that area. And so how do you see thriving in that neighborhood?
I've been with the building with Fitz for 7 years, and so I've worked closely with the principals in the past. And when we talk about how do we promote our schools, I feel Fitzmaurice did an excellent job with that. When Mr. Horton was there as principal, and when we became Turnaround, with the funds that we got from CDE, a big chunk of that went to student culture and family engagement. And so there was a lot of recruiting, a lot of going door to door, a lot of door tags, whatever it might be. Johnny also asked families if they were not coming to Fitz, why were they not coming to Fitz? So I believe all of those questions were asked at Fitz. But what's happening is there's no kids in the neighborhood. I mean, you walk on the streets and you don't see any kids. It's all older families. Homes have become very expensive. And that's where the loss of enrollment has happened through the years. And I know some people that do live in the neighborhood, and I've engaged in conversations with them as well. And, as much as they love the school, they also see that there aren't any kids in the neighborhood. So that's been a kind of progression, but I did want to address that we really have tried to promote the school and have really gone door to door to door. But then this last year couldn't do it because of COVID. Right.
too, just like as a parent, when you go on Enroll Jeffco, there's 5 schools you can choose from within a mile and a half, right? It's a very saturated area. For me, it was not a choice. Like, I wanted to walk my kid to school, and that was great. But I think when I put my address in, I have 2 homeschools, right? So, how does that impact how the average parent is going to choose what school they go to, and the decisions that they make?
Well, and I think, we don't have the hard exit, survey data, but I think when we presented in January, I gave a number of like 113, and we're at 108 today. And a lot of it is, they're not leaving because they're angry at Fitzmaurice. Those aren't the conversations that are happening. We've had a family, of 2 that moved to Arizona. We have a student today who's moving to the East Coast to be near friends. Mom got a new job. So again, I think, it's not that people are frustrated or unhappy with Fitzmaurice. There's just a lot of choice and a lot of options. Another place that we lose families and that was in the community. I don't know if you saw the responses to the community questions that were elevated at our community night. But Scott from Arvada K-8 called me and said, I have to take this family. Well, their kid got to middle school. And so for a family, as I'm a working mom, I'm going to drop my kids off at one school versus these different start times and different pieces. And so Arvada K-8 is one of the schools that has several of our students when you look at that response. And a lot of that is due to the ease of the family.
Did you have more, Ms. Parker? What other questions, Ms. Miller?
So what I'm hearing is it's not the charter world that's necessarily drawing. It's the fact of the census blocks are telling us we just don't have the kids. And the reality is when you look at that area and what the census blocks are telling us now is the population is smaller. I think it was brought up that we have fewer children that are being born. And candidly, we're kind of balancing between having people say stay in your home when you retire because that's the best place for you to be, and we want people to be in their homes, and we want people to, and with that means there's not going to be turnover of houses and for new families to come in. So it's a catch-22 in many ways for the belief stay in your home because that's where you belong and that's where where you should be, and we can't sell the house because people are staying in their building or in their houses. I guess the question would be, what would be your critical path? Have you guys talked about what your critical path would be for the next 12 months, 18 months? You've told us the challenge. You've laid that out very clearly, which I appreciate very much. What would be your path forward? What would you like it to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's continuing the work that we're doing. I think I came in this year and the staff has put a lot of hard work into examining instructional practices within the building. We have a new math resource that was purchased 2 years ago that they dove into during that COVID time, which was challenging. And then we have our new literacy resource. And so really it's continuation of the work that we're doing for kids. It's continuing to refine our MTSS work, which is what, is part of the district work right now. And, with the new resource, we're really at that core tier 1 place. And so, if we continue forward, we're engaging in those conversations of, okay, now what does that look like to provide that, targeted support to students that are still, data is still showing that. And so I think, that's the work we're doing right now. And that would be the work that we would continue to do moving forward. If we're moving forward next year, that would continuation of the work. And I think then thinking about, some of this data that may come out of some of these conversations and how does that family partnership and some of those pieces play into maybe expanding some of our second major improvement strategy, which is around an inclusive environment for our students and our families.
Yeah, I think I always go back to, what does equity look like? And are our students at Fitz getting that same experience? that they deserve that other students are getting, whether it's, and I love FITS. I mean, it's 7 years and it's my heart and soul. So this is nothing negative, but it's the reality. You know, they're not getting those, extracurricular activities after school. They're not getting, having 2 classrooms so that, 2 first grade classrooms so that, teachers can collaborate with each other. So it's about what the teachers are not getting as well, as far as that support instructionally, and that collaboration piece with their peers and that learning. So, I go back to that equity piece when I think about your question.
And I also think, like, it's not just a FITS question, and this isn't like a black and white or open or closed. Like, that whole area has schools that are like 200 kids. So how does one school impact Lawrence, Peck, Campbell, K-8, right? I think this is actually like a community conversation that's way beyond FITS, because when one school closes or opens, it's going to affect the others. And I think too, like, on that point of equity and on that point of some of our schools are very segregated. So how will one opening or closing hurt or benefit the schools that surround it?
So I want to build on what you're saying too, and I'm like fits all the way down into my bones, and that was not expected. I was secondary when I was teaching, and so to be at the elementary level now and love it the way that love being able to be alongside those kids. I think even though we're at capacity with the way that we're doing the work that we're doing, I think at the same time there have been some gifts in that too. And I've been out of the classroom for 12 years, and teaching again is really humbling, and it reminds me what it looks like when I am talking to teachers about, well, why don't you try this, and throwing that word just in there. Well, just, and when I'm just trying to make it work, it's regrounded me and energized me as an educator and a leader. Another thing around the reverse inclusion, there are students with autism who are in the class that Steph and I are both teaching, and we're talking about peer models, but I think that we also need to be thinking about our students with autism are also peer models. And instead of continuously thinking that it's neurotypical people who need to be taken care of or modeling for people who are not neurotypical, what it's supposed to look like. And so yesterday, I 2 times relied on the modeling of 2 of the students who have autism, who are in that class, for what it was supposed to look like and feel like to be engaged in the work, and what the behavior needed to look like. And that was without prompting from the paras. And so there, I've been in Jeffco for so long that I really do have that full Jeffco lens. It's not just about Fitzmaurice. I live in Arvada, so I have that lens as well. And I think about adaptive change versus a technical fix. And we've closed schools before, and it makes me wonder, are other areas schools ready for our students? Like you were saying, I've been in a school that absorbed a school that closed, and the culture work that is probably still in process, because I don't know that it ever actually was named when it happened. So a thriving school, and thinking about what those components would look like, seems that it would take more than just a decision around FTE. It would take a vision. And so I hope that time is dedicated to that. And also, if the writing is on the wall that we cannot sustain and we cannot thrive given what our projected enrollment is for next year, I will reiterate that would be respectful and responsible for the really great people who work at Fitzmaurice. So
Thank you for that. Yeah, Dr. Barta.
Well, thanks again for being here and welcoming Ms. Schooley and I to your school. It's a beautiful school, and I was really, it's what Mary said, your enthusiasm for your programs and the kids was just so obvious. And it was really great to meet some of the other staff while we were there. And I wanted to say, you might have heard me say at our last board meeting that I said, I don't know if we should have Fitz come to this meeting and talk to us, but it's what's just happened and what you said is really what I was trying to refer to is that I think right now as an area, you've done us a favor by helping us open a discussion that we needed to really have. And I think it's the responsibility of our board to dig in right now and follow a process that is really community engaged, open and authentic. And I feel it might be because I'm in that area also. I'm a parent who I'm not in that 1.5 mile area, but I think I'm just trying out of it. But I'm wondering what about all the schools right there? And I don't want to miss an opportunity to be innovative right now and really creative around opportunities like resource sharing. When I left your school, I was like, oh my gosh, their programs are so neat. They have amazing teachers and they have great staff. And I was thinking, can't we take the best of a school and resource share it with the best of another school and like make a super school? So I'm speaking way out of turn right now, but like what I was concerned about with focusing on just one school at a time was that we would miss an opportunity to do like a real kind of thinking lens around the ecosystem of that area right there. But that said, I understand that there is a moment here where kids need those resources. So it's just really difficult. And so I just kind of wanted to say thank you for starting the conversation and being brave and coming forward. And I did want to be clear that it's not that I didn't want to hear from you all by any means, but I want to make sure that we're just really thinking holistically about an area of kids. And I love the conversation about like how do we blend cultures across two schools if we are moving kids from one to the other. One of your staff said to me while I was there, the center kids are so lucky because they move as a cohort. And I said, well, why don't we move everyone as a cohort? Like why can't we talk about ideas we haven't thought of before or ways to do this kind of work that we haven't thought of before? So I don't know what the answers are, but I do think it's our responsibility as a group to have a vision of a thriving school and think about the ways that we can address really real urgent issues like this without losing that vision and big picture kind of perspective. So.
Ms. Reed, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the dialogue?
I just, again, want to thank you for coming today. I want to thank you for coming in January. This is unquestionably urgent, and I don't know that we have done right up until this point for our smaller schools. So I just really appreciate you coming forward, and it is clear that you love your students and you love your community, and we need to keep that love with us as we debate how best to handle this. So thank you very much.
So I just a couple of comments. One, gratitude all around. I want to make sure it's clear that the board has started a process for having these conversations and for identifying how do we create that sense of equity around the expectations for what all of our students can receive from their educational experience, regardless of what school they're in. It's obviously a complicated conversation, but we've begun that process sort of in parallel with the district strategic plan. So in part, thank you for helping us jumpstart something that has been promised from the board table for a couple of years now. And so I feel obviously there's a sense of urgency around that, and we are working to be responsive to the needs of not just one school, but of our school communities, plural, as we move forward. I also I've got some concerns that we'll need to think through, not just because they're my concerns, but because I think that they're legitimate concerns in terms of as we think about how we go through a respectful and with the words you use, an adaptive change process rather than a technical fix. We still have the current context of where our schools are, and having a kid that's at a smaller school, my concern, first of all, is the minute we start having this conversation, parents start taking their kids out of schools, and so I want to provide whatever it is. We need some seriously clear messaging around what we're doing and why and how this is going to benefit all kids at the end of it, because I do not want to starve schools and take away from the good work that you guys are doing already. Not you guys globally. I also have a sort of concern around how are we going to provide, what support do we need for all schools that are experiencing challenges due to enrollment as we work through this process. So I personally have concerns about split classrooms. I hear you, and I have heard from a lot of principals and educators. We are putting an intense amount of pressure around recovery of learning loss recovery, and there is no teacher I know, and I know a lot of real amazing teachers who can adequately teach a split class and meet all of those standards and get that job done in the way that we are expecting them to do. And I don't think it's fair. That's my editorial on that piece. So we are going to have a conversation about what we do while we're going through this process. And so I put that out there because I don't want to minimize that there's a real context around this for your staff, for your kids, and for your community that I don't have the answers to, but I know that we can maybe task someone to find those. Yeah.
Well, and can I just piggyback? That was something that I had wanted to share too. I mean, I do think, right, our community knows. And so as we look at Enroll Jeffco, I'm not seeing an improvement there yet. And I do think that this conversation could, impact families as they say, I got into that for my choice. That's a more stable choice. And also staff, right? Like they have a livelihood, they have families, they have health insurance, they have all of those things that they count on. And hiring season started this week. And there are a lot of jobs posted. And so I think that question, that you asked Ms. Miller about the continuation of the work, will we do it? 100%. Like dedicated can do it. Will we be doing it with the same staff? I'm not sure. Given the reality and people needing to look at more stable places, because the question I would ask is, we know that we're talking about, when you look at the data that was presented earlier, it is a pocket of our schools that are impacted. And so if not this year, then are we still part of that conversation next year? And if that's the case, and we lose students this year and we lose staff this year, and then next year the same thing, that feels exhausting and not really respectful of people either. And so I just want to share that piece.
Also, as a parent, when I chose Fitzmaurice, aside from the fact that I could walk there, one benefit was it was small, and I thought my kid would do great. And one downside is I knew it was small, and I know what's happened before in this district with small schools. And I think, part of the conversation of like, some of our schools are built to be small, and that's really good for them and their culture. I would love to see that continue, but I think we will also have to examine student-based budgeting and how that is really a detriment to those schools and how we don't let them thrive, because a first grade class with 15 kids is hurt way more, than a first grade class with 22 or 25 kids. And those are both great classes, right? But they don't have the resources to thrive.
Thank you for that. Yes, Ms. Miller.
My heart does ache. This has been going on for a long time, and we can go back to Pleasant View, and we can go back to others that have happened to people as opposed to with a community. And so I really want to put us at task as a board. I do want you all to be successful, and I do want you to have the resources you need. And I don't want, candidly, another round of what we experienced last year for that community or what happened a few years back. So I don't have the answer, Superintendent Dorland. I don't know what that means. Do we provide, how we provide that bridge? But I do want it to be with the community and with our families and with our staff, and thoughtfully plan what that 12 months, 18, whatever that looks like, is done respectfully and honorably. And I know we have a process in our docs or in our board, but we need to think a little bit bigger, I think, in that regard. So that's just my space to be with you all. So
Just on that note, I do want to acknowledge that when these things happen, and something I'm learning as a board member, I get emails from people who are for one thing and against another, and that is that it's happening. And so I do want to acknowledge, with community, we're hearing all the sides, and we are hearing them, and we'll. I just want to make sure all the sides know they're heard right now.
Yeah, Superintendent Dorland, not to put you on the spot, but I just want to know if you had anything to contribute or that you wanted to add to the conversation before we, sort of move this work forward.
Yeah, I do want to say something. Thank you, President Schooley. I'm just reflecting a little bit on some really powerful experiences that I've had as a staff member in a school community. I have some things in my office, actually, that I have there because the time that I spent with my colleagues, my principal, the office staff, the kitchen manager, the paraprofessionals in that building meant so much to me that I've kept those artifacts from that school with me for 20 years. And I still talk to people from that staff. In fact, one woman wrote me a letter for this job in this one school that I'm thinking about. But I've had several experiences like that. And, I was at another school this week who has experienced a loss, and talked to the staff and said, the relationships you build when you serve students together as a team is really powerful. And so when anything happens to your principal or a colleague, it's really impactful to the whole school staff and the whole school community, and many times parents too, who love the teachers. And so I'm just in this place of feeling at a loss for how to help, because I think, when Ms. Withy said, it really is sort of this cerebral experience of, it doesn't make sense for us to have 100 kids in a school building and split classrooms and teachers wearing 5 hats and all that. But at the same time, when you think about the situation from the heart, it's really hard to think about making a tactical decision, hopefully with some adaptive change wrapped around it for Fitzmaurice, and especially outside of a broad, comprehensive conversation about at least one region in our community. But honestly, there's probably 4 or 5 regions that we have to talk about. And I feel like I've inherited a big issue as the superintendent of this school district. And I guess I want to just say to the board, I am not going to let it go. I hear loud and clear from you that you want us to do something about this. It's going to be really difficult, but I also want to do it, as you were saying, with our community and not to our communities. And I feel like in this Fitzmaurice situation, given that you were, on the top of the list at the previous presentation, and you all had the courage to come to us, that we're sort of playing catch up and we're running out of time. And I'm really struggling with that because if we are going to make a decision for next year for Fitzmaurice, I want to make sure that we do everything we can to take care of the staff. I want to make sure we do everything we can to take care of the families and the students. And so I feel like the board is going to need to come to grips with a couple of options. And those options are figure out how to fund some additional supports so that Ms. Withy can do the work she said they want to continue, acknowledging that even though we add resources, it's not about money. Money will help, but it just isn't, because even if you have additional staff, you're still going to have such small class sizes and challenges with other things. And then this notion of like, well, then what's going to happen the next year, since we're starting this conversation and I'm promising to do something about it with all of you and our communities. And so it's just not going to go away. And so I think that there are a couple of options the board is going to have to talk through in the next month. And I think we literally have like a month or so to have those conversations so that we can be as respectful as possible to the school community so they know what's going on and what's going to happen and how we're going to support them through it. And I really am disappointed that we're in this place with so many schools, but especially with Fitzmaurice and the challenges you're facing, that we haven't had a broader process, that it hasn't been part of a bigger picture, and that it hasn't started earlier for you. And I'm sorry about that. And I promise that we will do better, and we need to do better as a district team in partnership with our school leaders, our teachers, and our communities. So those are my reflections. I don't think there's any answers in that, President Schooley, but I really do understand the passion that you build for a school community as staff and as families. And I think this is just a really difficult and challenging circumstance that we've got to figure out how to help with as leaders for this community.
So just as a reminder, so we don't do decision making at study sessions. I'm going to make sure like sort of expectation management for our process. But you have been heard loud and clear. And we have a board that what I'm feeling is extraordinarily dedicated and committed to engaging in difficult conversations and doing this work, not just, again, for one school community, but because this is something that impacts a significant number of our school communities, and it's beyond time for that conversation to be pushed forward into process and then how we move forward with our community members. So if there are no other comments, because we're almost at the end of the hour, and if you all have any comments you would like to share before, I don't mean to cut off that dialogue, but want to honor time as well. Okay. Thank you all for being here and for advocating for your communities. And we will get to the grind. Yeah. Thank you all. I did. Oh. That's called a schoolyism. I make up terms all the time. Okay. Board, I just want to check in with you. Do you all need a few minutes break? We've been going for a couple hours. Do you want to take a quick break before we jump into the capital improvement program? I'm hearing nothing. What? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and join our next guests. Thank you.
Just like a movie, just like a storybook. We are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. We'll take it all the way and live another day. We'll make a statement to the world that we're here to stay. Whoa, whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. It's time to be the hero. Rising like you've never seen, like you've never seen. We're looking for a hero, shining just like in a dream, just like in a dream, dream, dream. Are we the champions or just the shooting stars? We'll put our courage to the test in the final hour. And do we stand tall and rise above it all? You know we're coming at you hard like a cannonball. Whoa, whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. It's time to be the hero. Rising like you've never seen, like you've never seen. We're looking for a hero, shining just like in a dream, just like in a dream, dream, dream. And we won't give up, no, we won't back down. This is where we'll save the day. When the lights go out, yeah, we'll stand our ground. You know where there's a will, there's a way, yeah. Just like a movie, just like a storybook. We are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. It's time to be the hero. Rising like you've never seen, like you've never seen. We're looking for a hero, shining just like in a dream, just like in
All right, board members, we are now at our final public discussion this evening, the quarterly report on our capital improvement program, the fourth quarter report for 2021. For our audience, these quarterly reports to the board focus on the current status of the 2018 capital improvement program, projects anticipated to be completed by the start of the next school year, so 22-23 and beyond, the financial status, including contract awards and dispersed funds, and for the fourth quarter report, projects begun in the 2021 calendar year. Board members, we have 30 minutes for this discussion. Superintendent Dorland, anything to add?
No, I think that these slides are mostly the same kind of slides that you see every quarter. So hopefully they'll start to be familiar to those of you who are new. And I'm sure Ms. Miller and Ms. Schooley are familiar with them. So thank you to Tim and his team for putting them together. And I'm also excited to invite Brittany Warga. Did I say your last name correctly? Oh, yay! As one of our CAC members to join the conversation, which I think is a great opportunity for our board to hear directly from a CAC member. And really excited for Tim and Steve and Brittany to start the conversation.
Great, thank you.
All right, take it away.
Thank you. As you all know, we committed in 2018 with the passage of the bond issue that we would provide quarterly reports to the Board of Education about the capital improvement program overall. We have done that. This is the summary of the fourth quarter from 2021. The format is similar to what you've seen before. We chose that, and we've made some minor adjustments as requested by board members from time to time. But essentially, we wanted to keep it rather consistent so that we have a good tracking, if you will, and presentation model. I would like to say, although Superintendent Dorland mentioned Brittany, I'd like to say thank you, Brittany, for joining us as a member of our Capital Advisory Committee. And by day, Brittany is a project manager for AP Construction Company. So that will give you a little idea of what she does on a daily basis. So with that, as we usually do, Mr. Reed will lead the presentation, and then we'll entertain questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon. So we have just completed year 3 of our capital improvement program, just as an overview. I believe we've got a lot to show for what we've done. And 73% of the projects are either in design, under construction, completed, or in closeout. So we're making what I feel to be really great progress with the program. So looking at our forecasted revenue slide, it really hasn't changed much. It's still at $829.3 million for the total program. Probably the one thing that we are seeing is that we're really not collecting much in the way of interest. Actually, we're losing money when you factor bank fees in. So we lose, a few $1,000s every couple of months due to the bank fees and not having the interest to offset those fees. So looking at where the project is in terms of expenditures, as of the end of this quarter, we've expended $457 million. We have $99 million in encumbrances. So that's total, both the district schools as well as the charters combined. And that is roughly $45.6 million more than was in September 30 of 2021. So in that quarter, we spent $45.6 million. And our encumbrances dropped by $2.3 million. The charters, they spent approximately $4.3 million in that quarter on their projects, and their encumbrances dropped by about $90,000. A couple of things worth noting is that of the first issuance, we've spent 95% of those funds. And on the second issue, 26% of those funds are spent. And I've got a graphic in here that'll go into that in a little more detail. So looking at the next page, which kind of gives a sort of an overview of where our projects are, what their value is and things of that nature, you can see that out of the total of 341 projects that are slated for the entire program, we have 250 in design through completion. And that represents about 73%. As we look at our program contingency, you can see that on the capital improvement program, we're at roughly $57.3 million in unallocated contingency. And one of the things I want to point out is that you see the column that says forecast remaining funds and projects, and that $11.9 million, most of that money right now is based on consultant estimates. And with all due respect to our consultants, it's a very, very difficult market right now to predict what projects are going to cost. So that, I think we're optimistic that our consultants are being more conservative in their estimates. So we anticipate as we bid this project that we hopefully will see this number come down as opposed to going up. And then we have other programs. You can see the 19M through 22, those are individual smaller programs that we have allocations and sometimes big maintenance projects that really weren't covered in the capital improvement program that are funded through these programs. And again, they also have contingencies. So our bottom line is right now we're at $60.8 million in unallocated contingencies. And we will be able to look at some opportunities, assuming we keep that amount of money later on in the presentation. So this is an overview of the entire program, actually by month, and what it shows is the cash flow. So the orange bars, that represents the first issuance of bonds. The blue bars are the second issuance, and the green is our annual capital transfer set aside. So you can see that we've had two rather large peaks, and those were the bigger projects that have been completed or are nearly completed. Two really that are outstanding from the H side are the completion of Alameda High School and Pomona High School. Most of the other projects that are now under construction are G-bond or second issuance projects, and we will have a big spike next summer when a lot of that work, Marshdale, Prospect Valley, a number of additions that are currently under construction, all begin to be complete. And that'll be the last really big spike that we have for the rest of the program. Going forward, most of the projects will be renovations, what we call efficiency and future ready, which would involve secure entries, HVAC work, finishes, things of those nature. And then we also have in the program some additions that we've sort of deferred because we felt there were some enrollment issues that needed to be looked at before we made an investment in those buildings, as well as we still have two new schools that were passed as part of the bond, the Layden Rock School and one in the Rooney Valley. So this is work that we currently have under construction. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to visit Alameda yet, but we're having a ribbon cutting. I saw it on my calendar for March 2nd. So that will be a very, very exciting day. March 2nd, yes. And actually, I got to visit with the principal yesterday, and she's very, very excited, as are the students, to be in the new portion of the building. Pomona is nearing completion. We did a lot of the work during the summer, and then we did the auxiliary gym, completed that, so that's just about ready to be turned over to the students. Those are the two H-bond projects that still aren't complete. The rest of the work that you see up there, Marshdale, which is the only problem we have right now is that it's too cold to put a roof on, so hopefully we're going to get some warm weather up there, and for that to happen. But we've got the Marshdale D'Evelyn addition is well underway. Powderhorn is. Evergreen Middle is really moving right along as the high school. Stanley Lake, they're about to break ground up there on that project. Prospect Valley is again well underway, and they're starting to set steel this week on that project. Jeffco Open School, we have foundations in there, and we've done some interior renovation. And Ralston Valley, actually, they've mobilized and are breaking ground up there as well. So this is the work that we're currently bidding. Our busiest bid time is February, March, and April, and really February and March are the two busiest seasons. So you can see that right now we've got budgeted about $15.2 million worth of projects to be bid, and with the exception of the work that we're doing up at the outdoor labs, which is a new bunkhouse, residence for kids, and the new dining hall in Mount Evans. The rest of these projects are all renovation types of work. And so, where you see HVAC, that's mechanical equipment, boilers, chillers, plumbing, pipe, that kind of thing. And then we also have what we call the district-wide projects, where we bundle a bunch of projects and turn them over to a flooring contractor. So we're looking at 6 schools there, and actually we did, over Christmas break, we did gyms to 3 of these, where we replaced the gym floors. This is the work that we're looking at for March. Again, similar in nature. We do have another district-wide project with paving, where we do the same thing. And also, some of these paving projects involve some play pads and things of that nature as well, not just parking lots. And we're doing a lot of LED lighting and, again, more mechanical work. But the total we're looking at here is about $12.4 million. And then we have a capital reserve project, which is that Bear Creek artificial turf back in with the 2006 bond when they replaced Bear Creek High School. They put in an artificial turf field, and the life expectancy of those is approximately 10 to 12 years. And we always run annual tests to test the impact or the resiliency of the field, just to make sure that it doesn't injure our student athletes. So we have a separate project at the high school that we will bid, and then we will have the turf field, which will also be bid as a separate project. And so we could have a couple of contractors working there, which is not a big deal. But the Bear Creek artificial turf field will end up being one of these 22M projects that we looked at previously out of the annual transfer. And this is the last of the work, so this should show up in on your May board meeting. So again, we've got 6 playground projects that we're doing, and then some more renovation work. And then we have what we call the district-wide LED projects, where we actually go in after school is out and we do, replace the fluorescent lighting with LEDs. So we have sort of 2 of these kinds of projects going on. You'll see a lot of them in individual renovations, and then you will see the district-wides where they come in. But the goal is to have all of the district on LED lighting by the time the program is over. So this is a slide. One of the things that we talked about to the voters when we started, or when we were campaigning for the program, was that we would reduce the facility condition index, which is the FCI, by half by the time the program was over. So at the time, it was just under 21% when we started the program. right now and that's a preliminary number. When we issue our annual summary of findings, though, then we will have a more refined number. But right now it's at about 14.6, so we're tracking kind of just the way we would like to be to reach the 10 or below by the time the program is complete. Yes.
Can you explain more about what that is?
The facility condition index is what it is. It's a ratio where we track all of the deficiencies in the building. In other words, if it's got a faulty mechanical system or bad carpet or needs new paint, so we end up assigning a price to that school. So we accumulate all of the deficiencies, and then we have a replacement value of the building as it is, not as we might want it, but if we were to replace it as it is. So you divide the deficiencies by the replacement value, and you get a percentage, and that's what it is. So the higher the percentage, the worse the building is. And customarily, you look at about 65%, and that's really a borderline whether you should replace the building or not. So in a nutshell, that's what we have, and we have very few of those buildings right now. So,
Would an example be helpful of how that ratio? Well, real quickly, let's say we had a building that we value to replace of $10 million, and the deficiencies identified in the building were $4 million. All right, so that ratio of deficiencies divided by replacement is 4 divided by 10, or 40. Right, so that is below our theoretical poor line of 60 to 65. We're trying to drive the FCI district-wide of our buildings down to 10. Right? So that's our goal. Lofty goal, I will tell you, because we have buildings that are 60 years old. But that's what we're trying to do.
and I think another good example is Kendrick Lakes, because Kendrick Lakes was a building that was above the 65% range, and that's why it was on one of the reasons it was on the replacement list. That plus the size of the site, it could support putting a new building on there while we still kept the old one in operation. So, but yeah, that's really kind of the way it works. So this is a slide that we've shown before to the board, as well as we show it monthly to the CAC. Basically, it kind of outlines what inflation has done to us since July 2017, when a lot of these prices were put together. But I also added a column that is the year, kind of a year-to-date column, and you can see that this year we've seen some really significant bumps in our in inflation and what it costs to basically to do business. Now, some of the, over a 4-year time span, some of these commodities obviously fluctuate, but we did pick July 2017 and December 21 as kind of to establish the average, and then December 2020 and December 21, same thing. This is all Federal Reserve data, so it's pretty easy to access. And this is also a chart that we had at the last presentation, which is kind of a project overview that can be considered for our unallocated contingency. And we have a number of projects that either didn't make the initial capital improvement list, or that have been requested as we have gone forward by other schools and principals and things of that nature. So we have sort of guesstimated what those costs were. I do want to point out that the last iteration of this chart, we had inflation at $43 million. We reduced that because we bid work that has come in without us having to use premium. So the more work that we bid that we don't use premium on, then the better this number will get. And after we get through our bid season, I think we do anticipate having maybe a little more detailed discussion with the board on how some of this money might be allocated. And that concludes the presentation.
All right. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to open it up for questions and comments so that we can have a dialogue about this. And thanks to our CAC member for being here. I appreciate your time. Sorry, I caught you like right at the wrong time because you're trying to talk. But thank you for being here, for spending time. And were there any sort of thoughts or opening statements you wanted to make? Not opening statements, it's not a trial, but just to say hi, or do you want us just to kind of move forward?
Sure. My name's Brittany, and I've been a member, I think this is my second year now. I'm an architect, construction manager, and a parent, so I felt like this was a great fit for me. Tim and his group is doing a fantastic job. We have a great group of people that have been a part of the board for a while, in all different areas. So it's a great kind of melting pot for the construction and for the capital improvement for the district. So
Awesome. Thank you.
that speaks volumes. So yeah.
Wonderful. So who would like to start us off? Board? Ms. Parker?
Thank you. And Brittany, would it be fair then to say that you think this bond is being managed well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I have quite a few questions because I'm new to this process, so if you would bear with me. Since the interest rates that we're getting now are going down and the fees may be going up, do you anticipate that there'll be any projects that we won't be able to complete?
No. There's a trade-off here, and we were the beneficiary of the capital market environment when we issued both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of our bonds. Candidly, Phase 2 was significantly different in the capital market environment than we had expected because the premium that we were able to generate was about 2 times what we had realistically thought it might be. So there's several $1 million there of revenue that we were able to generate from the sale of our bonds on Phase 2. So that trade-off is we did that because the interest rate environment was so low. That translates to when you're a borrower, that's a really good environment. When you're an investor, it's not such a good environment. And we are an investor because when we issue bonds, we invest those proceeds and they are significant. So we knew that there's a trade-off, and unfortunately the return that we're getting on a monthly basis is minimal. Like Tim said, it's so minimal it's not even covering our cost of banking fees. Probably not unlike all of us, if you were to look at your savings account or even worse, your checking account, and the interest earned that you're getting on a monthly basis is not much. So that's the result of the marketplace.
Thanks. Next, for encumbrances, can you give me some examples?
Sure. When we enter into a contract with a consultant or a contractor, actually, the amount of money that we have not spent is still encumbered. So we've committed that money. And actually, all of the projects in the program have been committed in terms of having their budget assigned to them. So the money that's left over is just that. It's unallocated to any other project. But an encumbrance is just money that hasn't been spent yet, but is contracted for, or the work is contracted for.
Okay. And then for contingencies, can you give me an example of that for ongoing projects? And also you have the unallocated contingency projects. Who or how were those selected, the ones that haven't been unallocated yet?
Well, you're talking about the slide that's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that basically, we had projects that have been out there that, like I said earlier, just didn't get into the program. Fletcher Miller replacement, as an example, was one that we had 5 replacements, and the board directed us to trim back on the amount of bonds, so we cut Fletcher Miller and one other elementary school from that list to just go with three replacements. South Area Athletic Complex is something that we've been talking about and looking at for, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years for that matter. That would be built at the south end of the D'Evelyn site, the Quincy and Kipling property there. Again, we looked at possible building additions in there as an option for maybe instead of replacing two buildings, maybe we can put an addition on one and only close one building as a possibility.
I guess in summary, just these are above and beyond what were in the original plans for what we would be able to do. So this
is correct.
This is good news for us.
Can you, Tim, talk about how these projects made this list? Because I believe, based on conversations I've had, that many of these things were sort of things we wanted to do in 2018, but we didn't include them because of the amount of need that we had in our district. So can you build on that a little bit and explain sort of how these items are here? Is that helpful, Ms. Parker? Okay.
Okay. A real good example is Conifer High School auditorium. The principal and justifiably maintains that, we don't have a real high school because we don't have a true auditorium. So when we did the design work and we put an auxiliary gym up there, we actually paid the architect to go ahead and do the design for an auditorium. And that would help us establish both the price tag for it as well as where it would go, kind of lock that in. And then we did some square footage for a lobby and that kind of thing. So that is a project that wasn't in the original capital improvement program, but it is what we feel to be a legitimate need that warrants it being on this list. So all of the things that we see up here, we think there is a legitimate need, and it just becomes a matter of priority and how much money we have to spend.
And I think, based on conversations I've had with previous board members who were here in 2018, and maybe Ms. Miller and Ms. Schooley know, or maybe you don't, but I believe that one of the values that was driving some of the projects in the 2018 bond had to do with facility parity. And so high schools were in more disparate facility conditions, as well as just facility opportunity for kids. And students and families. And so I think this Conifer High School auditorium was in the interest of that value around consistency and equity in facility across our comprehensive high schools. That's just what previous board members have shared with me. And I think that's just an important to note because it's more values based in terms of why that one's on this list. And others may have different values that they aligned to, but I think some of that history is going to be really important for you all to know as we move into May and hopefully begin to discuss some of these items and maybe others.
And thank you. And so final two questions. One is, in your presentations that you give to us quarterly and we see these things, that's our opportunity as board oversight to look at, ask questions, and other than that, we would accept your list unless we had issue with it.
Well, customarily, the list we would review it first with the Capital Asset Advisory Committee and then allow them to make some suggestions or maybe recommendations to the board on projects that they believe you should give serious consideration to funding.
Okay, that's great. And then the last question, have you all managed bond projects before? And is this out of the ordinary?
He's Mr. Bond. I'm mini Bond. I've worked on 3. And
I've worked on several. So yes.
And so how would you characterize this when compared to others?
I will tell you, I'm going to give you a kind of analogy, at least of my history, right? My history is twofold. One is serving as the investment banker for Jeffco Schools as we developed a capital improvement program model that started, this will date me a little bit, in 1992. So I've been participant in all of those since 1992. I think there's been 14 from the district's level. So I've had that perspective on the capital side, on the financing side. Then in my role as the business operations person here, we've done bond issues in 2012. We've refinanced, which are not new money, but we refinanced some. We've done certificate of participations for new facilities. We've done tax anticipation notes for cash flow purposes. And we've done this major bond issue in 2018. The model that we developed for the district's overall bond program started way before 2018, is the model that we use and we have used in 2018 because it's efficient from a financing standpoint, from a use of fund standpoint, from a maximizing investment return standpoint, and from modeling the project implementation. So I feel like we have done this very well.
Thank you. Thanks. Who would like to go next? If you have any questions, this is not you don't have to. Ms. Miller?
Could we go back to the conversation about 2 more schools to be built and where we were planning to build them?
2 new schools. Okay, one is in the Layden Rock area. We have some sites that we've identified up there. And then the other is in the Rooney Valley and the Red Rocks Ranch development, where we have we've been deeded 11 acres out of the 22 acres set aside that we will have. So the Rooney Valley site will be in the Green Mountain articulation area, and the Layden would be in the Ralston Valley articulation area.
So I guess my question, going back to our previous presentation this afternoon, which shows the decline of enrollment in the Green Valley or Green Mountain area, as well as thinking about the population being served up in the Ralston Valley area, and that we've invested a bit of money in the schools that right now are in Green Mountain area, as well as we're continuing to invest up in the Ralston Valley area. My question is, would we have a reevaluation of whether or not it makes sense to actually be building these schools? Because if we are losing membership, my thought is we've invested a lot of money already in some of the schools where we're losing population and enrollment, and it might behoove us to consider either one, expanding a school that's in the area that would address the needs of that enrollment area for Green Mountain, for example. I don't know how many people we're expecting in that area, you all, but I think we have a number of schools there that certainly have a lot of capacity to serve, and we might think about redistricting as opposed to building a whole new school. So that's one question. I don't know if you all are talking about that at the CAC. But tying what we're seeing with membership and declining enrollment, and we're investing a lot in schools right now that are not only in Green Mountain but also in the Ralston Valley area. I would want to know if that would make sense to maybe reallocate or reconsider the redistricting of our students so that they would be going to the schools we've already invested in rather than building brand new schools. And if that were the case, if we were to consider a reallocation of those dollars, that money could go back into that list, potentially of opportunities, and might be able to fund some of, for example, the Fletcher Miller or the district-wide food kitchen. Thank you. I was like, so I'm just thinking through. I mean, we've been talking about enrollment. We're seeing what's happening. Deployment of capital. We've already invested a lot of money in a lot of these schools, and I'd rather be thoughtful about how we're using our current resources and how we could deploy that money differently to address that list of other possible needs.
I agree wholeheartedly, as do those of us here on the side of the table. because one of the things that was, I think, was very clear in the presentation you had earlier about the enrollment and trends throughout the district demonstrated a really clear situation for Jeffco schools. And that is that the complexities of enrollment is a dynamic, ever-changing environment. And it was mentioned, I think someone mentioned on the board, that this district was built on small neighborhood schools. That was the model. Well, I'm not sure that that model reflects the best interests of educating our students today. And if it doesn't, then it's incumbent upon us to review that model and determine if there are changes or modifications we need to make. We should do that because this is not a static environment, nor is it a linear environment on enrollment district-wide. It's not.
Right. And so following up on that,
Mhm.
you know, we've had land that's dedicated, right, to these schools. So I guess a couple questions. And we have to spend the money by a certain time, or at least a certain percentage of it by a certain time. And I don't know if we've hit
No,
that
there's-
arbitrage level or not.
Those schools will be funded by the capital transfer.
Oh, okay,
So they don't have that limitation applied.
So we have that window then, that expands
Correct.
a little bit longer. So that, to me, would give us the time to honor what our schools have been asking us to do, which is to talk about what we define as a thriving school and what we define as a robust environment and great, but also address lower operating costs, right? Because, you know, we know that that's an impact as well when you do a renovation. Sure. And so we've done a lot of that. And so how do we are thoughtful about the investments we've already made in these schools and how we might still hold on to the property. I don't want to give up the property that's been deeded to us, but maybe using our resources a little bit more.
Well, one of the reasons that the new schools are pushed out towards the end of the bond was that we've always maintained they were going to be enrollment driven. If there was no kids, then why would we build a school?
Okay.
And the tentative planning process for that is 2023, and it would take about a year to plan a new school. So what we're looking at is maybe by 2024, but the uncertainties in the economy, the uncertainties about where interest rates will be, will people be able to afford to buy the homes in Rooney Ranch or up in Layden? I don't know. And I think those are all factors that enter into the decision about what happens with the new school or with the new schools. So right now, they're pushed really towards the end of the bond. And then, like I said, we need to see if kids show up before we would want to do it. Now, the Layden piece, the kids are kind of already there. And I think there's an expectation from the Layden Rock folks that, you know, they've supported the bond and they're expecting to get a school. And
I understand they expect to get a school, and I get that. My concern is we've got a number of small schools that we invested a significant amount of money in.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't get necessarily a school when expected. Maybe we think about waiting. I'm just thinking
there's a lot of issues in that area. Yes.
To be putting out there when we're talking about other things that we're considering with talking with smaller schools and communities, and to say that we would build something with other considerations. I think we need to be thoughtful about that.
I would agree with that.
And I guess the question is, how much money has been allocated for that portion out of the capital transfer? Just so I have in my head, is it $25 million, $30 million?
It was 25 per school.
Right. I'm sorry. Oh, so if $25 to $30 million a piece, that's about $60 million.
Yeah.
That, you know, we could think about how that might be invested differently as we approach 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Are there other questions? We are getting close to the end of our time, and I do want to honor everyone's time here this evening. Ms. Reed, yeah.
I just really want to reinforce for our community how well this program has gone, because I think there's some confusion about that, and I don't understand how anyone can look at something and see that we got everything that we expected to get and that we have $60,000 left over, that they can look at that and think that that was not managed well. That looks incredible to me. And so I look at this list of needs, and or at least pretty serious wants. I would certainly love to see a central kitchen. So I'm looking at that, and obviously the 60 million that we have left over is not going to take care of all of these. So I would foresee that when this all closes out, that we may be asking folks for another bond issue at some point in the near future. And I do want to be very clear that obviously we have been good stewards, and we are thinking about using money efficiently and not just squandering it on, hey, these people want a new school or whatever, looking at what the best use of our facilities is. So I just commend you on a job well done, and I want to make sure that our community understands that this has been a very successful capital improvement project.
Hey, thanks, Ms. Reed. Dr. Barta, go ahead.
I like to take an opportunity with a community member here. I think what it has been promised and what we're really concerned about is that the program is transparent and that the community has trust in it. How do you feel that the community perceives the program around those concepts? And do you have any suggestions for ways we could improve transparency and communication to the public?
Sure. I think that we've gone above and beyond. We always, publish our minutes. We have been pretty transparent throughout the whole bond program. We've had an audit performed. We do annual audits. I believe all of that information is available to be reviewed. I think all of the construction projects have been successful. I don't foresee a way that it can be improved. I think it's been extremely transparent, and they've provided the metrics for what that success is. The graphics, I think, of what is expected and where we're tracking is very beneficial for the public to see.
Comment. I think Superintendent Dorland is working on the 30, 60, 90-day plan of all of the recommendations. And I think we would just all welcome if anything does come up or you have conversations with other community members, ideas for, I think there's been mentions of posting more things on websites that make it easier for people to access and just to be really committed to that transparency. So if things come up for the future, however it gets to us, I think we'd all really welcome ideas.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. The website always has the updates of the bond issuance and the construction, and the marketing department does a fantastic job with those, and getting out and highlighting those projects and highlighting the ribbon cuttings and the groundbreaking ceremonies. And this is where your money's gone to. This is what Jeffco is doing with it, and the success of that.
Yeah, great. Any other questions or comments? Superintendent Dorland, do you have anything else you'd like to add? All right. Were you raising your hand? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm just misinterpreting everybody. Thank you all so much. Thank you for taking your time to be here. We really appreciate all community members' participation on these committees. And this is such a big one, and it's so important to all of our schools. So thank you for your time. And thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, great. Okay, so board members, as our final two topics for tonight are executive session items, I'd like to combine our motions to move into executive session into one motion, unless there's any objections. Okay. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
I move that the Board of Education moves into executive session to seek advice of legal counsel regarding compliance with employment laws pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B and pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024A to consider the transfer or sale of real property no longer needed for school district purposes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All right, it has been moved and seconded. After the vote to move into executive session, the public portion of our meeting will end. The board will reconvene in open session at approximately 7 p.m. to adjourn our meeting from the seminar room. Roll call, please.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Ms. Schooley,
Yes.
Dr. Varda.
Yes.
Great. Board members, we will take a brief break to collect our stuff and move to the seminar room for executive session. Thank you to everyone paying attention and in the room. Thanks.